Right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see so many participants on today's call. Looks like we have about 60 participants here to talk about museums and to talk about reopening. I'm Ashley Howell, the Executive Director of the Tennessee State Museum, and I just want to thank you all for being here. I also want to give a special thanks to the Tennessee Association of Museums and members of the TAM community, because it's your input and feedback to the Economic Recovery Group that has been very helpful in getting state guidelines issued, not only for smaller museums, but there will also be large attraction guidelines that are going out this week. And so we will send those out as soon as we receive them. But overall, I think what's important to discuss, and what we're going to be discussing today, is as museums, we're in this pandemic together, and we all have specific challenges, but we also have shared challenges. And so we're going to be talking about that today. We are going to be featuring 3 museums talking about the reopening plans. We are going to do some discussion around those reopening plans first. Then we're going to open it up for questions. We've had some questions that were submitted in advance. And I also encourage you to use the chat function for questions. And so where the chat function is, if you look at the bottom part of your screen, if you scroll your mouse, there looks like a conversation bubble. If you click that, the chat box will on the bottom right of your screen. Please make sure to select all participants so we can see your questions. And Ken Mays is going to be helping me go through those questions to make sure that they get answered through the course of this presentation. So let me introduce our presenters. We have Scott Williams from Discovery Park of America, Adam Alfrey from East Tennessee History Center, and Elaine Meyer from the Museum of Appalachia. And so we are going to start with Scott, and we're going to start with just a couple of questions, some basic questions. When are you planning to reopen? And what are some steps that you are planning to take for staff and visitors?
Sure. First of all, thank you for letting me be here this afternoon. We wanted to open slowly, and so we are opening just for our members on May 30th and 31st, and then on June 1st we'll open to the public. That's just the outside part. We have a museum and a heritage park, fortunately. The heritage park is 50 acres and it's outdoors, so our strategy is to open that first and get a lot of testing in, make sure that we have everything set up the way that keeps everybody as safe as possible, and then open the museum and do the same thing. Obviously, the health and safety precautions will be a little different inside than they are outside. But for employees, we also want them to have a good feeling that we're taking this seriously and that their health and safety is the #1 most important thing that we have going on. So employees will have their temperatures taken as they arrive every morning. We're encouraging hand washing every hour. We're requiring them to wear masks when they're out and about around guests. We're really encouraging distance and keeping a distance from each other and from the guests. And then, of course, we're fortunate that Polly and the operations team here, when they first opened, had the foresight to have a nurse on duty anytime we're open. So we'll continue that. And the safety precautions for guests are actually quite similar. We're not going to do temperature checks as people enter, but we are doing 6 feet apart, and we're encouraging masks but not requiring them. So following those guidelines for guests as well.
What about you? When is your museum opening? And then what are some of those things you're considering for staff and visitors as well?
Yeah, we're still evaluating new guidelines that we're receiving from the Knox County Health Department. So right now we're targeting the first part of June to the middle of June for our reopening. Um, and what we're considering or doing for the staff is very similar to what Scott just mentioned. With all those daily health checks, we've implemented a cloud-based system where all the staff logs in and sort of clicks and checks the sort of safety check health questions. So we're logging that way. That's something that's been very useful to keep track of that. We're also sort of using the hierarchy of controls and using physical distancing in part of our work plan. So since we're not using our auditorium now, that's become a space where we can all stay apart and meet for meetings, for team development, and even using it as a lunch break area. Another thing as a staff that we're trying to take on is decluttering spaces so that things can be wiped down and cleaned easier. Sometimes we like to pile things in certain areas and just taking the time to make that more efficient. And then for those that have been to the History Center before, they also know that we have as part of our collection, the archives and special collections through the public library. So working on for the staff, the materials handling policy for collections, we've established quarantine locations where materials that are handled by the public or come into the collection will be held for a 48-hour period prior to processing those collections. From a visitor standpoint, we're planning to open it at a 50% capacity. Really looking at passive experiences and trying to create a one-way visitor flow so that there's not a lot of back and forth contact with individuals' faces. And we are considering closing an hour early to allow for additional cleaning protocol. One of the things that's from the curatorial department that I've actually enjoyed in this process is we've made sort of a commitment not to be the museum of red tape and warning signs. So we're trying to figure out how to build all those precautions into something that feels themed and is part of the museum experience. So we're trying to look for stories, images that we can put around the hand sanitizing stations and provide context and maybe have a little bit of humor with it as well. And then with the museum shop, we're trying to change that around to have sort of a touch-free shopping experience.
Great. I'm glad that somebody's finding humor in the situation that we're in. So that's very interesting approach. Now, Elaine, you've opened, and so talk to us about opening. When you opened, some of the things that the Museum of Appalachia put in place, and also what you found. So not only some of the steps that you put in place, but some of the findings as well.
Yeah, well, we did sort of a soft opening. We opened on May the 9th, and we opened sort of gradually, and we didn't tell a lot of people. We didn't have a press release or anything like that in the beginning. We just sort of did a soft opening in it. So we didn't want a lot of people. We wanted to see what would happen, and it was Mother's Day, so Mother's Day weekend. So we were a little bit apprehensive, but it worked out really well. And we did a lot of the same things that both Scott and Adam talked about. And we have, maybe like some of you all, we have different businesses. So we have our gift shop, we have our restaurant, which both of those are pretty booming. And then we have our museum, and our museum consists of many buildings. So it was quite challenging to sort of figure all of that out. And we haven't got it all figured out yet. But I guess to the first point of the staff, we require them to wear masks. We take their temperature daily. We do the CDC wellness check. We remind them about hand washing. We have sanitizers everywhere. We provide gloves, but offer that as whatever they would like to do. With the guests, one of the things that we found that we like and the guests like is minimizing the touch points. So when they walk in the door, we have all of our doors open, all the doors open to our main building as you enter, as you exit, to all of our main exhibit buildings, to all of our cabins. So they really don't have to touch a single door the whole time. So they like that. And I don't know if Adam was alluding to that, but they don't like negatives. We sense that, don't walk here or don't do this or don't do that. So we try to be as positive as possible. And we request that you wear a mask, but we don't require it. We ask that you stay 6 feet apart. It's those kinds of things. And we found that our customers like that. There's a lot of people that are, uh, for whatever reason, are a little bit tense about people telling them what to do. So that's one of the things that we found in opening up.
So Elaine, you brought up an interesting point, and it's come up before too, that so many of our locations have different facets, whether it's a retail space, front space. One of the things that I will mention to everyone who's joined us is it's important to look at those state guidelines for those specific areas, the specific guidelines for restaurants, retail, and hopefully with this conversation, as people are putting their plans together and refining their plans, they see a lot of similarities in what they are preparing as well. What I'm also hearing from our panelists is some very creative ways in approaching this. So whether it's wayfinding for visitors, signage, of course, there's a cost to printing signage and implementing some of these things. What are some of those low-cost ways? I'm hearing this, but for everybody who's listening, that you've been able to implement some of these guidelines and pathways for visitors that museums can think about while still being mindful of the budget.
We are trying to be clever, like you said, finding a little bit of humor. And so when we open, we have these are little mock-ups of the little yard signs that we're going to have out. And they're going to be specific to the area. So it'll say one antique tractor, for your health and safety, remember to keep one antique tractor apart from others, or 6 mallard ducks, or 3 koi fish, depending on, where they are. And they're, bright and colorful. And we, our talented designer added the word CARES to our logo. So it says Discovery Park of America CARES. And then we're really going at it, to Elaine's point, from a real compassionate place instead of a bossy, preachy place. We're all in this together kind of thing. So that's one of the things we're doing. And then to your point about food and beverage, we are shutting our water fountains down. And we've had to go back to our Coke distributor and negotiate to give us a smaller, less expensive bottle than the expensive large bottles that we have carried in the past, because people were able to access the water fountain, so it wasn't as big a deal. We've put plexiglass behind all of our in front of all of our cash registers, and then we're only going to serve pre-prepared food, pre-packaged food, as opposed to some of the stuff that we had been preparing.
Yeah, and just as an example for some of our signs, we use a quilt pattern to distinguish different portions of our gallery. So instead of having signage that says, say, 6 feet apart, we're encouraging everybody to follow the quilt trail. And those patterns change throughout the museum, and they happen to be placed about 6 feet apart. So it feels welcoming, it feels part of the design, but it still has a reminder there. When I mentioned those hand sanitizing stations, we found some that were about $200 that included the mechanism, and it also included the graphic that surrounded it. So we're going to put some World War I era signage around it, like do your part, be a part of, almost make it like it's your patriotic duty to be a part of that period of history. So just finding ways to theme the same outcome in a different experience.
These are all great suggestions. Thank you so much for sharing. So I have to ask, so Elaine, of course, has opened. Scott and Adam, you're working on reopening. What keeps you up at night? What are some of the questions that you're still mulling over? What's on the to-do list? What are those things that you're still thinking about? And also for our participants, a part of this, what are some things that they need to be thinking about as well?
Well, I guess obviously one of the things that keeps probably all of us up at night is worrying about what if one of us gets the virus? What if one of us gets the virus and affects all of our coworkers, the people that really run the show, and then our guests? That bothers me. It really, really bothers me. What if somebody here gets the virus and we're all affected, and or we infect other people? That's really troubling.
I've always said this is not a hospital. Lives are not in danger. I can't say that anymore. So these decisions are big decisions that we're making, and trying to navigate so that everybody stays as healthy as possible and that we remain financially viable so that we can continue to exist. It's two things that you really have to be careful with.
I completely agree. And internally, as a staff, some of the other things along those same lines that we're beginning to wrestle with is what's the public response going to be to these newly implemented regulations? What happens when they take to TripAdvisor and air a statement about that? How do we handle those type of responses? I think sort of simmering there too is also legal ramifications down the road. How does that all play out? What does that look like? One of the other things we've been considering and still trying to wrap our heads around is our local health department has asked us to help participate in contact tracing. What does that look like for our institution? Are we capable of doing that? And then I think the other thing, we've been so focused on getting back up to work in a remote way, now focusing on reopening, that we haven't really had the opportunity to reflect and see what worked well, what didn't, but then also to go ahead and start planning just in case this happens again. Where are we going to go if we have to go back home for a while?
I would just tag on to that because, in thinking about if we have to do this again, sort of what are those steps for closure? How would specifically the State Museum close again? Is there a specified period of time? Specifically, as Elaine mentioned, if one of us gets sick, if I get sick, and I've been in the building or I've passed it to somebody else, what is that time frame? Is that something that you all have considered in these reopening plans to say, what is that emergency closure plan in the future? Is that something that is similar than that you've already enacted? Talk about any planning that you've done thinking about if there is another massive outbreak.
I am so focused on the disaster of the moment that I haven't thought really much about the next disaster other than, if I get sick, I'm tossing the ball to Polly. She hopes I don't get sick. No, we're learning a lot going through this. I think one thing that we did do early on that I think I would embrace and do again whenever this happens is we actually had just launched a brand new website, and much to the chagrin of our marketing person, Katie, I got the password, so I can actually go on the website and post something and communicate it instantly. And so I think that being able to we have basically 3 pages that I keep updated. One is with the rules for employees, rules and guidelines. One is the rules and guidelines for our guests, and one is the rules and guidelines for our special events business. And so as things change, and as Polly or any of our other staff say, here's something we need to add, I can pop in there and add it in that moment and let everybody know it's been updated. So being able to have a tool like that, I think is something that I've been thankful for every day. So if it happens again, I'm jumping right back on there, and that's how we're going to handle it.
Actually, I'm not sure if it's a public document, but here in Knox County, I know the health department has said when they've had an outbreak at a business, that the health department actually comes in and advises them on the steps to take. And I wonder if there's not a document that we might be able to get from the state, or perhaps even borrow from one of our county agencies to share, just to perhaps give us some guidance that would be useful should that scenario play out.
That's great. I will just mention a couple of resources that have been posted during this conversation are links to state guidelines. We talked about restaurants. We talked about the general business guidelines. There are a couple of links here. We can definitely look at that and see if there's any additional resources to send to the group. There was also a request for examples of signage. So, if we can coordinate how to make that available, and if anybody who's on the call would also like to share examples, perhaps we can that just to share resources. I think this is an important point that has been brought up in this discussion, even if it's sort of a loose plan. Scott, as you said, I'm just handing everything over to Polly. Talking about that among management teams of, what is the worst case scenario? It's one of those things when, sort of in precedented times instead of unprecedented times, when you're talking about, what are the biggest threats to an organization, quite frankly, it's not looking so, those threats aren't looking so bad as they are right now. And so it is sort of thinking about a new worst case scenario and what that looks like. One of the things too that was mentioned is how museums how we do have to reconcile the economic recovery of our institutions in relation to public health. And so let me say, we all understand the challenges that were faced in sort of dealing with this. So lastly, I would just ask, what guidance do you have for museums as they are planning for reopening? We've mentioned some of those, but anything that you have learned through this process as people are looking at their plans and comparing their plans or thinking about new things, what's some guidance that you would give to them?
Actually, I think I stole this phrase from you. I think you said that someone told you that it was like planning in the middle of a washing machine, that it's so fluid and it changes every moment. And I think that's the one thing I personally had to learn, is that as much as I want to be a planner and know where I'm going, that you have to remain fluid. I think it's also important to continue to listen, and listen as broadly as possible. If that's even listening to donors, to membership, to volunteers, might be interested to know what they're thinking about in terms of when to re-engage. And then again, a personal reflection was one of being patient. It's just instead of being reactionary, and every morning when you get new information, just take the time to let it process and see if it changes within the next 24 hours. And then the only other thing that I keep trying to think about, I happened to have to go to a store the other day, and you could tell that store had read the guidelines and that they were trying to fulfill every guideline to the nth level. But when you looked around and looked at it as the comprehensive whole, they were failing pretty miserably because the execution didn't really rise to the surface. And I think after seeing that visually, that it reminded me that we should approach this like we do any of our other museum programs. Think about it in terms of staff safety, public safety, and then how we execute it at a high level, and do the things that are within our control. It doesn't mean that it has to be everything gold plated, but it has to be done well in a way that's meaningful and that has a big impact. And I think that's what we're all used to doing, is to finding ways to care for the public, engage the public, communicate with them, but also do it in a responsible way.
Yeah, I would say over communicate, up, down, around, to the board. Just over communicate, number one. And then Cassie said it in the chat, be ready to pivot. We've been pivoting nonstop. And so, be willing to say, I was wrong. I'm changing my mind. We're going to go this way now. And just really let your team know that we're going to be pivoting on a dime these coming months, year. So anyway, be flexible.
I would add, give a little grace to yourself, to others, and don't stress so much. I think to Adam's point, sometimes you are so stressed over doing every single thing completely right that you're going to mess it up greatly. Just calm down and do the best you can. Use common sense and just give a little grace to yourself and to others, and I think you'll do much better.
I think that's really, really, really important, and it's something that has sort of risen to my mind several times through this last few months. Is everybody is going through this at a different speed and in a different way, and you're right. Give everybody room to, I have some on my team who are wearing 6 masks, and are terrified, and others who, don't seem to get the message. There's a pandemic going on. So, everybody's their own person, and just give everybody room to deal with this in their own way.
I agree with that. It's, the museum profession in general, we're a profession of people who wear many different hats. And I think this is definitely that time where you say, okay, what are those things that I am going to be focusing on? And of course it's sort of the disaster that's in front of us. And then what are those things that we just have to let go of and really to focus on this and execute that. And, again, I know many of our folks that are on the call today, they wear many, many hats. And so, they're really thinking about this from soup to nuts. And so it's, what is that guidance to help them implement that? I'm going to ask Kim to help me with some questions. We've had some questions that have come through the chat. Please continue to submit questions. We also had some questions submitted in advance.
So we can get to one of the ones that was submitted through the chat. It was specifically about cleanliness and accessibility. Thinking about chairs as people sit down to take a break as they walk around your museum, maybe audio sets, handouts, and they even mentioned wheelchair assistance. I guess if you provide that service, like how are you going to manage that throughout the day? Or suggestions on managing those things throughout the day. I think chairs is a big one because we all have benches and places for people to sit. Are we wiping those down periodically, or how's that working?
Yes.
Our crew is, our housekeeping crew is going to be wiping down all those things. We're also, I was a little hesitant to open 7 days a week, and just go after it 100%. So we're going to be closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays for deep cleaning. And so we'll have the whole housekeeping crew come in on those 2 days and really do a deep clean. That has multiple benefits. Just in case we're not super busy, it gives me a couple of days where I don't have a huge payroll. And then I've noticed in all the media interviews I've done, the media has picked up on that and asked me about that. They'll say, I see on Tuesdays and Wednesdays you have a deep clean. So I think it also helps instill, confidence from our guests. But I do think I think everybody, us included, is going to need to rethink. If you're handing out a lot of things, you're just creating more work for yourself. So we're going to rethink some of the things that we do and the ways we do them, especially inside, and try to rethink some of the interactives and maybe have them. I mean, we're a hands-on interactive museum is how we bill ourselves. So, we're going to rethink some of that, and make changes, because I do think this is not going to be over in 2 months. I mean, it's our new world.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo that in terms of that's sort of where my mind is now going, is how do we start retooling the museum experience to be interactive but not as driven, because I think that's where really we're going to be having that conversation long term. And for us, in terms of we've actually removed some of the seating out of the space to give opportunities for people to distance and stand in some of the theaters. So we're trying to find a balance between those elements.
Yeah, and it's fairly easy for us to clean off some benches, but some of ours are logs and things that aren't easy to clean. It's a little challenging for us.
Hopefully they're in the sun, right?
Yeah, right.
Another question that is probably pertaining to your most recent or current situation has to do with digital space and virtual programs, and if anybody is considering even monetizing those.
To be honest with you, I have long, since I got here, wished that we did more content and storytelling in our digital space and less buy a ticket for this, come to, and so we maximize the opportunity, if you want to call it that, to actually start getting artifacts of the day, to let our docents have the chance to do Facebook Lives and do videos and really take everything that we have here and put it out there in the digital space for everybody to be able to see. And that has gone really well. Our online traffic is up, and it's been a great opportunity for us to spotlight some of the educational components of what we do. And we're going to continue doing that from now on. That is going to be part of our new normal. And I'm really grateful for that. And we're going to put some more strategy behind it, and figure out some ways to really execute our mission in the digital space. Polly and I have been talking about how we are going to, a few weeks ago, a school that was supposed to be here couldn't make it. So I just took my phone and did a Zoom call with them, and they had 35 little kids, on the Zoom call. And I just literally walked around the museum with zero preparation, and just ad-libbed, and I swiped through a few times, and kids were all staring and paying attention. And, so Polly and I talked about maybe we can monetize that, because I know we're going to be talking about groups. I think school groups are going to be the last ones back. So in the meantime, that's a big chunk of our revenue. So we are looking at, is that a possibility for revenue generation?
We dipped our toe in the sort of digital program last week. One of the core parts of the mission of the History Center is to promote the region's history. And we do that by, when people visit here, sending them out, getting them to go to other places. And that's sort of hard to do right now. So we tried to take the opportunity to visit somewhere else virtual. So last week we went down to the Tellico Blockhouse and toured there with Ranger Rexroad. This week we're going up to the birthplace of Country Music Museum. So having this network of museums that work together and are partnering, it's creating a really cool digital program and personally, what was exciting to me is the people that attended. The level of questions were well crafted. They were engaged. They were using the tools that were available. We did it via Zoom, and it worked out really well. So I completely agree with you, Scott. Any way that we can get this out there, get people engaging in that way, it's still mission driven and really valuable.
And we've been doing iPhone videos and sharing those with, we've been doing garden planting, feeding of the animals. We had some baby pea chicks born last week, and showing that, and showing some of our more interactive exhibits and demonstrating those. And we plan to continue doing that, but also figuring out a way to monetize that somehow. Musicians doing some programming in that realm too. And people love it. They absolutely love it. But we're going to miss out on so much, like you guys are as well, on our revenue stream. So we have to figure out some way to monetize that.
Adam, we had a specific question about your touch-free shopping. What does that look like?
We're still playing around with it, but the idea is to create displays. Say, for instance, if you had 10 or so t-shirts, you have a display of those t-shirts, and they're numbered 1 through 10. So a person could say, I'd like t-shirt number 2 in size small, and you would go and retrieve that for them. So just trying to find ways that people can still see, perhaps walk through the store, but not picking up and touching everything as part of the process.
Then there was a question about museum personnel becoming bouncers. You know, how are you going to handle inconsiderate guests in your facility?
We're not open yet, so I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I think we're going to continue to manage our guest experience the same way we did before. We do a lot of training on customer service and what to do in this case scenario and what to do in this. We're not expecting our docents to be police, and we're not going to have them busting up people that they might think are standing too close together, because they don't know who's quarantined together and who's part of a family. And so we're going to remove that obligation. But we are going to have signs everywhere, and they're going to, you know, they already, our team already knows how to encounter a grumpy guest and turn them around into a grateful guest. And so I anticipate that will be the same, but we shall see.
I think that personally, an answer to that would be kind of goes hand in hand with the next one, where somebody asked about posting the rules and regulations on social media. And I think clear communication with your guests as they come in, and that includes your digital space as well, is helpful in mitigating some of that on the front end. We talked earlier about chairs and so forth. I assume that the same policy relates to your public bathrooms, as far as keeping them clean and having them cleaned periodically throughout the day. Is that the plan, to do that?
We're closing down every other sink and closing down every other toilet and the water fountains, you know, all of those things to keep everybody as far apart as possible. And then cleaned. Our restrooms are already the cleanest in Tennessee. Sorry. But we'll continue that policy.
Yeah, that's sort of our plan too, is to increase the cleaning throughout the day. And we've actually encouraged our cleaning staff who's present while we're open to be visible, to be out wiping down doorknobs, handles, to be on the floor. That way, it's just a nice reminder that we're doing everything we can to make sure everyone's safe.
Yes, we're doing the same thing. We're wiping down constantly. And so we're out there and visible, and the guests love it. And they thank the ladies who are doing that, and the gentlemen who are doing that. They thank them. And so far we've had positive responses regarding that.
Have you had any issues getting cleaning supplies or wipes or, you know, or especially Elaine, since you've opened, have you had any issues procuring that? But also to Scott and Adam, do you feel like you have adequate supplies to open?
We have had some problems, but we thankfully have a large gift shop. And so actually some of our vendors of the things that we are selling in our gift shop, we were able to buy in large quantities. So we're actually able to use some of those supplies to clean. So we're good right now.
I mean, for us, I don't know how many people we're going to have when we open. So it's hard to say. We do have a large quantity of hand cleaners, and we installed 12 new little hand sanitizers and 8 new things where you pull the hand cleaner out. And we've got little packages of hand cleaner we're going to give people. And we've also bought some masks that we're going to give away free for anyone who wants one. So, you know, it depends on it. Hopefully, I honestly would almost like to start to run out so that we'll need to have more rather than have too much left over.
Yeah, and same here. Kudos to the staff to think about that early on. We ordered early on and have things sort of trickling in. So I think we feel pretty comfortable.
We've got a question about accessibility. Have you guys given any thoughts to how you're going to handle accessibility? There are specific questions about hard of hearing or deaf people. while talking to them with a mask on. But other issues that you can think that might come up with other challenges accessibility wise?
We have, Polly has instructed the docents and everybody else if they can pull the mask down to lip read with a guest who's hard of hearing if that's necessary. We're also going to, while we're opening the outside, the wheelchairs and everything are on the inside. So we're gonna, tomorrow we actually have a meeting to discuss how we have a runner perhaps who can call a radio and say, I need a wheelchair down here, much like the airport does. And so, we're working through that as well. And then, we don't have any other kind of devices that we hand out, like, hearing devices. But if we did, I would consider trying to figure out a way to work around it if I didn't think I was going to be able to keep them clean enough.
We're going to enact the same protocol with the mask for us.
We haven't had any problems so far. The only problem we've had is one of our staff members is pregnant, and she got really too hot one day with the mask. But other than that, we've been okay so far.
What kind of masks are you guys using, Elaine?
We're just using the cloth masks. We have someone who makes them for us, so that's what we're using. What about you guys?
We're going to let people wear whatever mask that they want to. We're going to have this kind that I prefer, that, regular old mask. And then we have had folks, while they've been off, while they've been getting paid, some of them have been making masks. And then we just bought some inserts that go in them that hopefully will help them be safer. But a lot of people have been making and giving me masks, but I personally really like this kind of mask better because it's hot.
So we're having lots of questions about programming, school groups, summer camps, tour groups. Are you guys there yet in planning for those activities, or is that still in the future to kind of develop?
We have canceled our Lego camp because we don't want to have to clean all those Legos. It would be almost impossible. But then we have an outdoor camp that we're going to continue with and keep people 6 feet apart. We have a Tennessee naturalist program that we're going to go ahead and continue with and have everybody be 6 feet apart and wear masks. We have some stargazing programs. We're going to try to return as much as possible to a state of the new normal without putting anyone in danger. Anything we can do 6 feet apart and outdoors. I don't know if anybody saw it. We posted it on our social media, but Holly led a training seminar and we had our employees all sitting 6 feet apart, and we put that online and it got a huge pickup, both media, but also a lot of our employees said that their family members appreciated seeing that in our local paper because it told them that we were taking this seriously. So we're definitely sticking to keeping everybody far apart from each other.
Yeah, that was our conversation we started having today about what that looks like for our summer. And it comes down to space for us because unfortunately we don't have an exterior space that we can program in. So we've got to figure out what is our capacity, what that looks like. The alternate that we have discussed is creating sort of curbside camps to go, little kits that are ready for parents to use if they're home with their kids this summer, so that they've got an activity every day that's history based, that's curriculum based, that's hands-on that they can do at home. So that's sort of the two areas that we've been discussing internally.
And we're going to try to do some of our events. We're going to go ahead with our July 4th Anvil shoot. And we are going to sell tickets every 2 hours. And we're going to limit those. And we're going to have those people socially distanced apart, and we're only going to sell a few tickets for each 2-hour time period. And then a lot of our other events are going to be canceled, but we're trying to figure out some ways to do more group activities and more of our signature events. But it's a work in progress for sure right now.
So one of the things that I ran across was guidance for childcare providers, and I think that would be adaptable for summer camp situations. I'll put a link to it down here. It's it's on the state's website, and it looks like what they're doing is they're limiting class sizes to 10, keeping those kids together. So if you have multiple classes, you're not, every hour mixing them up. So activity wise, you can't say, okay, pick and choose what you want to do. And I know locally here, the city, that's their plan too for their summer camp, is to keep groups together. Field trips will be very limited. And then that way, if there's anybody that's contagious, it stays within that group and it's not getting spread to other groups. But I'll put a link to that in the chat in case anybody wants to look at it for policies for summer camps if they're still planning on doing summer camps. What are you guys doing now for marketing? There's been a couple of questions about marketing. Are you doing any marketing right now, or are you waiting until you open, waiting to let people kind of meander in as they hear that you're opening, or what's going on with that?
I mean, we're definitely not letting people meander in. We're full steam ahead with earned media, pulsing out news and information. We're sharing lots and lots of photos of us outside, of all the opportunities outside. We're going to start allowing fishing, so we're talking a lot about that. We have a digital campaign out there right now through our agency, which is Advance Tour and Travel Agency. So they're buying keywords, things to do in Northwest Tennessee, things to do in West Tennessee. We're not buying any print and not buying any television and not buying any radio right now, but we're spending about $50,000 altogether until probably July.
Yeah, and for us, I think most of ours is very much in that same way, very organic in terms of just trying to share what we are doing, being active behind the scenes. And before the call started, I really appreciated, I told Scott that I appreciated a statement that he had in a press event that he had where he talked about what all the staff had done behind the scenes. He said we've attended hundreds of webinars, we're educating ourselves, and even on with the call that we were on with Commissioner Ezell yesterday, he really applauded sending out images showing your staff interacting with the public, but doing it in a safe way. And I think that's going to be part of the imagery that's going to have to go out and reassure folks that it's now manageable to re-engage in some of these spaces.
And I am finding the local and really regional press is very anxious for images, for quotes, for anybody to talk about opening. So putting it out there and letting them know that you're available, I think, is a real key to getting some local media.
Yeah, and ours right now is digital. We're doing, like I said before, lots of things outside with the gardens and the animals and lots of things. People are really looking to get outside, but get away from their homes. So they have loved being here because they get to do things a little bit differently, get outside, get some fresh air, and be around nature and that kind of thing. So they have loved being here. So that's worked out pretty well for us. But as far as really marketing upcoming events and all, we're not there yet.
Have you guys given any thoughts to case cleaning and stuff? Your gallery space. I know you guys talked a little bit about the space that people are using, but what about the space that people are just passively going through? Would be new directions on how you get that cleaned and disinfected?
Yeah, I appreciate that comment because they talk about it being a true disinfectant. We did some research and tried to find a disinfectant that was low in its ammonia quotient to be safe on the plexi, because most of our signage is reverse mounted plexiglass. And the disinfectant does call for a wait time. It has to be wet for 30 seconds prior, and they actually prefer that it sits on the surface and evaporates for it to be a true disinfectant. So it took a little bit of time to do some research on that and look at what was available for us. But that's the way we went with. We tried to find one that was at least copacetic with acrylic surfaces.
Are you able to share that, Adam? What the brand was?
Yeah, I can try to go downstairs and find that.
There was another question about staff temps. I know Adam said that they were self-reporting. Scott, did you guys say that you're self-reporting, or are you actually taking temps of staff whenever they report every day?
We actually have one of our nurses, as people come in, they have a list of questions she's asking, and then she's taking their temp. And we've had a few people whose temp was too high, so she had them pull over off to the side. We have an entrance place, and then after they cooled off because they'd had their windows down or whatever, and they passed. But she's filing those away for the time being. And then if you come in early like I do, we do have a table set up for me to be able to go in every day and do it myself and answer the questions and take my own temperature.
And Elaine, are you guys doing it on site, or are you guys self-reporting?
No, we're doing it on site. And so far, no one's had a high temperature, so we're good so far.
Are you guys using touchless, or are you using the head thermometer? Or?
The touchless, yes.
Okay, actually, I think we got through most of the questions in broad strokes. We can try to narrow these down if we continue to do sessions like this in the future to get in more detail on some of these, especially the things that deal with future programs. And we're looking at school groups and tour groups and stuff like that in the fall.
Thank you, Ken. That's exactly right. We want this to be a conversation. One of the things that we've discussed is having another presentation in the future, especially as people start reopening, looking at some survey questions to museums, looking at, for instance, impacts to revenue, changes they've made in their plans, and following this up in a couple of weeks. So I hope that there's continued interest. We had, I think at our height, over 90 participants on today's call. So I just want to thank everybody for joining in. If anything, we just wanted to stress that we're all in this together. We are looking at plans, revising plans, learning to be nimble, and being support for one another. So I just want to thank the Tennessee Association of Museums for reaching out across the state to continuing to provide professional education to all of us and allowing us to share. We will continue this. As I said, I think we've gone through most of the questions. There were a couple of comments about virtual field trips. Please use Facebook, TAM Facebook, sharing signage. Let's continue this information. I will also mention that while we were on this call, the state has released the large attraction guidelines. So this was very timely. So I've put that link on the chat. We will also send that out. So thank you to our panelists, Scott, Adam, and Elaine. We all wish you the best of luck. Thank you, Polly. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, State Museum staff, Mamie, Jeff, Lauren. And Thanks to all who participated in this. And if there's any follow-up, just send us an email. Polly's email was in the invitation. My email is ashley.howell@tn.gov. And thank you all for doing the great work that you do. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.